Hello, everyone. This is Lubna, or Dr. Lubna Rashid, if you want to be formal about it. And I am a postdoc at with Jan Kratza's research group, and my focus is on the intersections of entrepreneurship, digitalization, sustainability, mostly focusing on some of the grand societal challenges, as we call them. So some of the global big issues that the world is facing, and that how that intersects with entrepreneurship and innovation. My backgrounds are a bit all over the place. So the first thing I studied was biotechnology, and I developed here a background in the life sciences and worked in a genetics lab. And then from then did my master's in the Department of Industrial Engineering, and from then did my PhD also here, focusing on entrepreneurship, particularly as a developmental way in some of the world's most fragile and challenging contexts. My interest in using innovative research methods also stems from the fact that I've had also my own struggles in my research journey, and that using the more common techniques such as questionnaires or interviews in the world we live in today, where we are flooded by data everywhere, and it just doesn't seem to be very 21st century, and that we can definitely start moving more towards using more robust, more complex methods, more data-driven methods in the age of data that we live in today. So I hope that I can give you a little bit of an overview of some of those methods, some of the ways data can be gathered, some sources of data you can actually use for research that you might not have thought about so far. And I hope this will be useful for you. So let's start. So as we know, this century particularly has a lot of issues that are at a bigger scale than, or maybe completely entirely new to the world. Things like nuclear weapons or artificial intelligence or global warming. And so luckily, business research has started a bit catching up and addressing some of these issues during business research, because business research was typically highly associated with just profit maximization, turnover rate, focusing on quite financial outcomes of businesses. But now it has started moving more and more towards paying attention to social issues. So, and that has been done so far employing different methods. So we have a lot of papers that we see using survey-based quantitative methods. Collecting data typically through questionnaires, like you see the example on the left. This has used data from 1,562 respondents from China. The other one on the right, I don't know why I gave two Chinese examples here, but okay. And then the second one on the right is a much bigger sample. This is collected through the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, which is a huge database publicly available for anyone, the GEM, related to entrepreneurship and small business data. But it's also questionnaire. Maybe if we use this data, I'm not collecting the data myself, I'm just using the data that is already collected, but it's still a questionnaire. Other typical methods are interview-based qualitative methods, which I'm sure you're quite familiar with already. So here are examples of business research addressing social problems such as refugee entrepreneurship and discrimination in the labor market, and issues such as scaling green innovations in low-income settings. And in those settings where you have maybe your data pool is quite limited, and your data pool is also maybe difficult to find. Like, there is no centralized database of refugee entrepreneurs in Europe, so you can't just send a questionnaire out there. And so you have to find specific people that you talk to, and that translates to qualitative methods. Same thing with the example on the right. Marlene, the author of this paper, is actually a friend of mine. She went to India herself and went to a village and found a few entrepreneurs there who have been using very low resources to start businesses that are environmentally friendly. And she basically observed and examined their processes and how they have been doing this. But again, in those kind of settings, it's useful to employ some qualitative methods. And then we see a lot of conceptual papers coming up. So conceptual research is more about just synthesizing findings from other researchers and proposing new theories, proposing new concepts, more like reflecting on the status of a specific field in research. So for example, making a typology of social entrepreneurs. What types of social entrepreneurs exist? So these authors have read through lots of papers and lots of case studies that others have published and just summarized them and made some proposals based on this. And the paper on the right about like business models for a circular economy. This is also mostly just asking some questions, some major questions, and developing some research frameworks. But here there is no empirical data being collected or analyzed in those kinds of research. And then we have literature reviews, which I'm sure you also know about. And most of them are done manually, where you download hundreds of papers that are related to specific keywords that you're looking for, specific topics you're interested in, and then you read through them, clean them up, and come up with certain conclusions based on that. However, collecting data in research, whether it's qualitative data or quantitative data with questionnaires, and even like working manually with hundreds and hundreds of papers to do literature reviews, while I was doing my PhD, I was just all the time, why am I doing this? This is could be a very difficult and frustrating process. It takes a lot of time. You always feel like you're begging people to answer your questionnaire and sending 1,000 reminders, and you feel annoying and needy. I mean, there are so many things in it that can make you feel frustrated. And especially, I would say, especially in the last couple of years since COVID started, people they have no interest anymore in just filling online questionnaires all the time, and it's even more difficult to reach people. So another problem as well is that no matter what we do with those kinds of methods, we probably have a very small data set in the end compared to the general world population that we have. So even if you have a questionnaire where you get 200 responses, great, you can make some regression analysis on that. That's a good enough sample size for statistics. But we're in a world with 8 billion people. So, it's like, how much can I really generalize my findings to the world and say, hey, my research says that this and this and this should be changed globally in business because these are my findings. So you still have a limitation with data size, no matter how much you go. Of course, there are many more limitations, but what I want to focus about is the bright side of the fact that we have massive data now available, which we don't need to collect ourselves, at least not running around people and collecting this data. So it's time for social science researchers to use methods that actually, fit for the century we live in. And maybe we don't have to collect all our data from questionnaires or surveys or manually analyze everything or have to deal with small sample sizes because people are not answering us. So we have a lot of data already available. We can either run away from it, we can drown in it, or we can just use it and do something useful. So where can we get this kind of data? If we're talking about data that we're not collecting from questionnaires or interviews, or data that someone else has collected through questionnaires and interviews that we can use, like the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, for example. So one approach is citizen science. Has anyone heard of this? No. Okay. So citizen science is like Zooniverse would be a nice website to check for you. This is a publicly open database of picture data, images. So you have citizen science is a way of collecting data for research in which citizens, like normal people, proactively get engaged in doing so. For example, if you, for a specific research question about, okay, what is the state of deforestation in sub-Saharan Africa, then in that case, sub-Saharan African farmers and people who are in the field or people who are going hiking in those forests can just take pictures of whatever deforested parts of the area they find, and then they just upload them to the platform. And this could be like a call for the general population. Hey, humans, we are interested in knowing more about this topic, or there's a social problem in this particular place, and we would like to collect pictures about it to document this problem. And so people will start just uploading pictures and posting those, those pictures online. And if you go to Zooniverse, there have been already hundreds of projects that have been started in the last years where pictures have been collected from thousands and thousands of people on very different topics. The screenshot you see here is I filtered Zooniverse by social science projects, and there are some examples that came up. These were some of the examples. Things like looking at health in the workplace and unhealthy habits of people, so collecting pictures there, architecture, etc. And there might be some applications for this in management science. If, for example, I know a colleague of mine who's interested in maybe asking people working in the gig economy to send pictures of their working condition in the warehouses. And this could be anyone. Like anyone who might be working in, in an Amazon warehouse might be sending pictures, and then we can do analyses on these pictures. That's one example. And then biological data is becoming also more and more used in management science, which is also quite interesting. It's very tricky to feel like where's the limit of the data that we want to share about ourselves so that it could be used for this kind of research. But there has been a move to using things like brain images, for example, to look at entrepreneurial behavior. So differences in people's behavior based on how their brains look like. And things like biological data that is collected from sensors. An example is maybe we want to look at the stress levels in the workplace. And then we can get heart rate data from the smartwatches and look at when the heart rate is too high, this is normally an indication of stress in combination with other factors, of course, and maybe we can use this as input data, as an example. And then there are experiments. Experimental designs are also widely used in the life sciences, but also a lot in psychology, where we are just mimicking some specific, like we're creating a specific environment for people that are the test subjects there, the people we're doing the research on, and monitoring their behavior. We're just mostly observing. So we're creating a specific environment, and then we're observing what do people do in this environment and recording those observations. And then, if we want to look at text data particularly, there are just so many resources out there for text data, written data that we can also use, like magazines and newspapers. You have hundreds of thousands of magazine articles or newspaper articles in any newspaper you can think of. If you go online and click on archive, you're probably going to find thousands of articles there. Social media feeds, this is getting also bigger and bigger in research. And then online databases. For example, the example on the top is Startup Map Berlin. This is a map of over 4,000 startups existing in Berlin, and there's a big table there that shows you the data about all of them, and it's updated regularly. And Kaggle. If you haven't heard of Kaggle, I would also recommend checking it out, because Kaggle is basically a database of databases that contains just so many different data sets, publicly available, free to use data sets about basically anything. The housing market in the USA and fluctuation in housing prices, to climate emissions, to whatever you can think of. So it could be interesting to go there and see if there's a data set that you can use for something. Okay, so how do we collect digital text data? So if we're looking now at, let's stick to those, like if we're looking at, I want to download, I went on the Tagesschau website or the Guardian or whatever. In this case, I went to WAMDA. WAMDA is a Middle Eastern, it's an Arabic-based media website focusing on technology and business in the Middle East. I know it because I also know the founders of WAMDA, and I was working with them in the same building some years ago in Lebanon. But yeah, so when I go to WAMDA's website and just click on all their articles, I can see that are articles that were posted as early as 2013, I think, or 2012, and that are over 4,000 articles in there. So how can I actually do research on them? How do I get this data? Same thing with social media feeds. If I want to look at the entrepreneurship hashtag, for example, and see all the tweets that have the hashtag entrepreneurship in it, and then do some research on this data. How do I actually extract it? So for a lot of websites, what you can first do is just ask. And that's actually often a very, a good shortcut, because a lot of like magazine or newspaper editors, they might not have a problem giving you their archive as a downloaded files. So they would give you the TXT files, the text files of all the, newspaper articles that were published over a specific period of time, if you tell them you're using it for a specific research purpose, etc. So this is, of course, could be your first way. Of course, that doesn't always work. Most of the times it's very difficult to get people to send you their data, even if it's not personal data. So that's when we sometimes resort to just publicly available and downloadable sources. So if you go to something like Web of Science, I just searched here the term sustainable business in Web of Science and got more than 40,000 entries. So, and then there's an export button where I can click and download at least the titles and the abstracts of those papers if I want to do something on them. So you can just download things yourself. But again, there are a lot of data sources where you can't just do that. And that's where we go to scraping. So web scraping is basically a method of extracting data from online sources, from websites, from like company websites, for example, charts. You can even get social media feeds. You can get news resources. You can also scrape search engine results. Like you can, if you type something in, I don't know, you search for a specific thing in Google, and then you have all the entries. You can use a scraper to extract all these entries. And then you will have a list of all the Google search results from a particular search phrase. You can do this with many programming languages. Python is the one that's mostly used, and you have 2 different Python libraries, and actually more, that you can use for scraping. And basically scraping would be, you write a specific code, and that code would be downloading the information from those websites that you need for you. And actually the examples I showed here, it was also a bit on purpose, is because I already have the scraped data from all these 3 websites because we actually I worked on this before. So this WAMDA website has already been scraped by a colleague of mine, and we already just wrote this code where and it just extracted the full text of all of these magazine articles that were published in WAMDA over the last 7 years or something. So we have the full text now in a nice table. With Startup Map Berlin, we also built a scraper that was able to extract a huge table with all the data of those startups. And also we scraped Twitter, and we got a lot of social media, so a lot of tweets from the platform. So definitely there are many options for scraping data, and there are many databases, many websites that allow you to scrape them. And the only thing, the first thing you need to just be aware of if you're going to scrape a website is that there might be some legal constraints, and there might be some websites that are built in a way where it's illegal to scrape them. For example, don't try to scrape banking websites, because this is getting financial information of people. Don't do that. So normally I would only use scraping for data that is already publicly available. You can already go to a newspaper website and read the archive. It's just very difficult to download all these newspaper articles and do something with them for research purposes. Also with Twitter, you can already open it and search for a hashtag, and you're gonna see the tweets anyway. So you're not actually accessing data that's not already accessible to you. You're just finding a way to download it and work with it. So with Twitter in particular, if you're interested in scraping Twitter, it's actually quite easy going and straightforward. You can just go to developer.twitter.com. You don't even need to write a Python code here that's complicated. In Twitter, they already have built a tool called an API. So Twitter itself provides you with a tool to scrape Twitter. So Twitter allows you to scrape it, which makes life much easier. And if you're a researcher affiliated with a university, then they allow you to scrape something like up to 10 million tweets a month or something like this. So it's a huge, huge number of data that you can get from them for free. And they have developed a tool that helps you do it. And there are some tutorials on how to use it. So if anyone wants to work with social media data and get Twitter data, I definitely recommend. First of all, you have to have your own Twitter account. And second of all, create also a developer account and just go for it. Now the challenges of using this text data. Text data, when you if you get thousands of tweets or if you get magazine articles and then you want to do some analysis with them, if you're not doing the analysis manually and reading those things yourself, which you're not going to do if you have 10,000 magazine articles or 10 million tweets, I'm not going to read them, at least not as a first step. I need to filter and filter and filter and maybe read the last subset that is actually really cleaned up and relevant for my research purposes. The problem is if we ask an algorithm to read the text data, there are a lot of ambiguities and issues with text data. Like the first example is that there might be a specific word in a sentence that might have multiple meanings. So saying like, I don't know, I saw her duck, it could mean, oh, I'm ducking, or it could mean I saw her duck, the animal. And also there could be within a certain sequence of words or a sentence, there could be also multiple meanings. Like if we say the chicken is ready to eat, does it mean I'm ready to eat the chicken, or that the chicken wants to eat its food? So these are also issues with using text data, and that's why there needs to be a lot of cleaning and processing when you get data from something like Twitter or from a newspaper website, etc. To clean up the data, there are certain things that you need to do. There are a lot more things that you need to do than this, but this is just a little example. We need to remove punctuations, emojis, white spaces, things like stop words, we call them. These are basically words that don't have a meaning for the analysis. The word of or by or with, it doesn't give me any information. It's needed for the sentence structure, but if I want to analyze from Twitter data, let's say I want to look at what are entrepreneurs' feelings towards the COVID-19 pandemic. And I looked at hashtag entrepreneurship and hashtag coronavirus on Twitter and extracted all the tweets that have both hashtags. So now I have tweets that have both coronavirus and entrepreneurship in them, and I want to look at those tweets and see, okay, what do these tweets what are these tweets talking about? And I want to like check the tweets that particularly talk about the impact of coronavirus on entrepreneurs, and see what kind of conclusions I can make from this. Words like, you know, of, at, with, this is just noise in this kind of data, because I need only to know what kind of, if this is concerned with entrepreneurship, if this is concerned with the coronavirus, and I want to know the feelings of the entrepreneurs who wrote them. So maybe words like, I feel wonderful, or my business shut down, or things like this. And yeah, these are maybe things that are relevant, but there are so many irrelevant words as well, which we need to remove. We need to correct spelling errors sometimes. Also normalizing text, because like lowercase, uppercase can be confusing for the algorithm. So we need to do a lot of steps to clean up the text before using it. Once we get past it, it's a lot of work. And actually there are some statistics that show for people who, data scientists or machine learning specialists who work with those kinds of mass data sources, they spend more than 60% of their time just cleaning the data they get. So the analysis time is actually, analyzing the data is much simpler, and you know, writing the code to extract the data is also quite simple, but then the data cleanup process is what really takes a lot of time. But it's often a straightforward process, and there are specific steps you need to go through. And once you get to do this, then there are a couple of different analysis methods you can do on the data. So now we're talking about text data. Particularly, I'm going to show you just 2 examples of what you can do with text data that you get from newspapers or tweets, for example. So one example is sentiment analysis. Another word for it is opinion mining. And this is basically a technique to analyze the emotion in a text. So we want to look at public opinions towards COVID vaccines, or we want to look at, as I said, the impact of the pandemic on entrepreneurs, or we want to look at tech business owners and their attitudes towards, their opinions towards climate change. So in that case, we have text, like we want to look at the newspaper articles that were written on tech business owners and their opinions on climate change, and analyze the opinions mentioned in those articles. Or we want to look at, for example, tweets that they published. Trying to also look at things like Facebook posts or Instagram posts, it's much more tricky because Facebook does not provide an API to help you extract its data, but Twitter does. So that's why Twitter is also much more of a common platform to use. It just gets more technically complicated to do it with other things like Facebook, and you have to jump through many hoops. But yeah, so sentiment analysis is basically you want to classify the text that you have as either positive, negative, or neutral. So you have, and so the algorithm in that case will take all the data from the tweets that you extracted or from the magazine articles that you downloaded, and then go through them one by one, tweet by tweet, or magazine article by magazine article, and then check, is this talking about something positive? Is this talking about something negative? And it looks for specific words there. Like if you say, words like optimism, words like I don't know, feeling great or wonderful, then it knows, this is probably a positive statement. I'm going to classify it in the positive section. It can get tricky because sometimes we say there is lack of optimism and we don't say optimism. So, you know, that word might be triggering, but the algorithms have also learned to look at phrases and which words come together and not just a word. So it doesn't look at optimism alone, it would look at lack of optimism. So we're now getting into the technical details of how these algorithms work, but these exist, and they're actually also, there are a lot of templates that can be used, so we don't need to also learn every single detail of how to create this from scratch. And then this is an example and a paper I would recommend you look at if you want to maybe ever do a research project using sentiment analysis. This is a review of research papers that have used sentiment analysis in them. If you're interested in taking this kind of approach and you have a research question that can be answered in this method, for example, you want to look at people's opinions or feelings or like sentiments regarding a specific phenomena or topic. So yeah, as I said, I don't know, managers' views of climate change or whatever it is, people's opinions of a new innovation policy. So yeah, if we're looking to look at people's feelings, looking at how these have been portrayed in the media or how they express themselves in social media, such as Twitter, then definitely something like sentiment analysis can be very useful. And this paper here, with the link in the bottom, I'll be sharing the slides with you later, can be a good starting point. Okay. And then another approach to dealing with text data is topic modeling. Has anyone ever heard of topic modeling? No. Okay. So topic modeling is a way to organize and summarize large collections of mostly text data. So basically, in this case, the algorithm's gonna go through your text, for example, the media articles, or maybe even scientific articles, because you can do literature reviews with this. Can you still see me? Maybe just write in the chat. Because my camera is quite frozen from my side. I see myself frozen, but I don't know if you see me moving. Okay, I'll just continue. Okay, so topic modeling is basically a way to, build categories out of large messes of data, let's say. So in that case, for example, let's say you have downloaded, you have 1,000 scientific articles or policy briefs or magazine articles related to circular economy. Yeah, but we don't know what they actually talk about. We don't know what topics within circular economy they concern. So a topic model is a way to look at, so the algorithm goes through the text and looks at the most common words that come up in the text, and then it looks at correlations between the words. So which words in the text come together or are co-occur with each other. So for example, maybe it finds that words like entrepreneurship, green, energy, wind, and circular and recycling are in one group. So you know, okay, so those 1,000 articles that we have talk a lot about wind energy and recycling, which doesn't really make sense because recycling and wind energy are different topics, but just something I threw out there. So yeah, it would be looking at what are the main topics that come together, and helps you really understand the patterns in your text. It's a technique that came from the life sciences originally, but now it's very commonly used everywhere. So we also have many uses for it in management, but in basically every field. So like if you look at the example, there's a text here, and then the algorithm is going and looking at specific words, like for example here, organism, life, and survive are highlighted in pink. And then we have genes and genomes and sequence are highlighted yellow. And then computer, numbers, and computational are highlighted in blue, with prediction is also in blue. So then it looks at the words that come more likely together, and those words that come together will form a topic. So then you know that the pink topic is talking about life, evolution, and of organisms. Look, basically, it's probably about origins of life through evolution of organisms. And this can be done in any kind of field. And in business, there are a couple of things you can look into. The links to these articles are there, so you can actually also do really nice literature reviews using topic modeling rather than doing literature review the manual, time-consuming way. So instead of reading 300, 400 articles about a certain topic manually to try to make out conclusions, you can have the algorithm do it for you. It's beautiful. It makes life so much easier, and you also end up seeing some patterns that you yourself as an individual might not be able to see. These are just two examples of journals that have used topic models. The second one on the right is they have done topic modeling for a blog in Russia and collected like a huge number of blogs from bloggers on the elections, and then they did topic modeling on that data to see what are these people actually talking about in their blogs and try to make some conclusions out of that. I'm currently personally working on a project with topic modeling. I'm doing a topic modeling approach on scientific literature related to entrepreneurship and mental health. And so I basically just extracted all the papers in two huge databases, academic databases, related to, I put keywords like related to entrepreneurship, but also related to mental health. And now all the papers that came out, we have already done one run of topic modeling on them to try to see what are these papers talking about? What kind of mental health conditions are related to maybe what types of entrepreneurship or what contexts? The scope of the project has been now expanded a lot, so we're going to do it more on new work and mental health and not just entrepreneurship, so including things like gig economy, like Instagram influencers, like all those different types of making money that have emerged in the last years that didn't really exist before. But the first run we did with this project with entrepreneurship and mental health, not new work and mental health, you can see some topics that emerged. And we visualize each topic as a word cloud, which is basically a collection of words clouded together. And then we manually group topics that looked similar to each other. So for example, topics 3, 11, and 10, we just put them in one group because look at the words here. Topic 10 has words like violence, women, gender, market, business, family. And then we went and looked at which papers are in this topic actually. How did this get created? And then we see that they're mostly papers talking about gender-based violence against women entrepreneurs. I mean, when I started the literature review on entrepreneurship and mental health, I really wasn't expecting this to be even a topic that will come up. But there we are. And it has received some attention from many researchers in parts of the world. And then topic 11, it also is a bit similar because it's talking about action, disaster, resource, motivation, business. When I looked at the papers there, it largely talks about how people use resources to stay motivated in their businesses, even in cases of disaster or a big challenge that happens in the environment. The reason we put this close with the women topic is because they're both talking about adversities and challenges on a personal level, like things that the entrepreneur goes through or the business owner goes through, and how the person adapts and how the person, finds resources. Yeah, and we have like topics like in this like right-hand block. You have topics 14, 16, and 7. For example, topic 14, you see words like well-being, happiness, subjective, satisfaction, life, they come together. And I looked at the papers there, and they're mostly talking about the well-being and satisfaction of entrepreneurs. Does innovation make us happier? Does entrepreneurship maybe make us, more satisfied with life, or maybe more stressed with life? But mostly talking about the happiness, well-being sides. So yeah, that was a way of doing a literature review without having to read every single paper, and to mostly just understand, okay, we have hundreds and hundreds of articles that have elements of entrepreneurship and elements of mental health in them, but we don't know how to classify them. We don't know what they actually talk about, what topics they address. And so this was a way of doing so. And as I mentioned, we decided to increase the scope of the project to not just talk about entrepreneurship. And I'm actually looking right now for a student assistant for this particular project. So shameless promotion. If you're interested in this, then feel free to write me, because I'm actually looking for someone to support with this. So that's one thing I'm working on. And if you're interested in starting to work with these topics in general, starting to work with things like sentiment analysis or topic modeling, but also learning how to do machine learning and learn the basics, these are 3 courses that I would recommend you start with. That's how I started. I don't have a computer science background. As I mentioned, I have a biology background. Then I did my master's in operations management and industrial engineering, and then I did my PhD in entrepreneurship and management. But yeah, like I also harnessed a lot of online resources for my research. Also, if you want to understand more and more how things like artificial intelligence and big data are being currently used in entrepreneurship, this is a nice article that summarizes it, and which you can read and can give you some insights. And I also have given here a bunch of other examples of other articles, other scientific articles that have used such topics very nicely. So this article they have used both topic modeling and sentiment analysis to analyze tweets related to climate change. And I found it very interesting that they have done something like this. So I would also really recommend looking into this. And then and of course, text data. I focused a lot on text data now because it's also the most commonly available, maybe kind of data, or maybe at least for business purposes can come up with the most interesting research questions. But we can also consider working with pictures and videos. Images and videos are processed very similarly, actually, because videos have to be converted to images before they can be analyzed anyway. So working with a video is similar to working with an image. It's just that the video is going to be converted to a series of thousands of, series of images to be worked with. But and so the method here is called computer vision. It's another machine learning technique where also we use an algorithm to detect patterns in images. How can this apply to business research? Here's one example of a study that was done also quite recently, looking at facial expressions and how facial expressions can impact crowdfunding decisions. So in this case, they had analyzed the loan applications for like over 43,000 entrepreneurs who, they have written applications to get loans for their businesses. And each of the applications had a picture of an entrepreneur, of the person sending the application. And they analyzed using this image recognition technique. They analyzed the facial expressions of the people in those pictures on those over 43,000 applications. and realized that the applications of women the successful applications of women generally have, like, women exhibit different facial expressions rather than men. And it's, yeah, I mean, of course, I don't know how much I agree with the results of the study, but the approach, I found it very interesting. So it looks like, according to their findings, that men who have more like sadness or happiness in their facial expression are more likely to have successful loan applications, versus women who have more facial expressions of anger or disgust. I don't know what it means to look disgusted in a picture, but yeah, that women who have more of these, like, I guess, more darker kinds of facial expressions might be more successful to get loan applications rather than smiling in your picture. So yeah. So that's just one research example of dealing with image data. If you're interested in things like also working with video, there's also a nice article about using video methods in strategy research. These authors actually present already a toolkit. So they already present you with a tool that you can use for this kind of research. So as I said, for all of these techniques, there are already so many tools and manuals that have been developed that you don't need to do anything from scratch. You just need to learn, like, maybe some basic Python knowledge, which I already put you some links to tutorials you can use, and have some basic, understand the basics of data cleaning and machine learning. But it's not something you need to spend years working on, but you need to dedicate a couple of months, and then you might already be able to get started. Other examples, I mentioned citizen science before. There's here a nice paper that talks about the uses of citizen science in the social sciences and humanities, which includes management, of course. So feel free to look into this. Also, if you're interested in experiments, there's a paper here that can help you get started. And these are some papers also related to how to leverage biological data for entrepreneurship research. Genetics data in entrepreneurship, there's a long article that was published on it on the left side here, you can see it. And also there is more and more research being done on neurodiversity. So neurodiversity, talking about how differences in the brain structures impact decision-making in organizations. So, like, for example, different brain structures means, for example, having ADHD or having autism, that qualifies as a neurodiverse condition. And in that case, sometimes brain images are used, but of course also people also use questionnaires and surveys and interviews. And the last one on the top bottom right, I just found it a very interesting article where they made a study associating a specific parasite infection with entrepreneurial engagement and performance. So apparently, if you've been infected with this parasite, which only infects pregnant women, it increases your chances of having a successful business somehow. If you're curious, just look into it. So, and if, again, these are a couple of more books which are available open access for download. So these are free to download. Here are the links to download them. If you're interested in really learning more about how to use text analysis in the social sciences, or just Python in general and Python data science. So I hope that this amount of input that you received today was not maybe too overwhelming. I realized that there might have been a lot of new material in there, but this was meant to just give you a little bits and pieces into different types of data sources, different types of research designs, different ways of doing research that are being done maybe in other disciplines such as psychology or biology, and maybe that will inspire you for your own work. I'm available for questions. I'm available for future contact. If you find some of these things intriguing to you, and also when you start thinking of writing a master thesis sometime in the future, as I mentioned, I'm also working on a project where there might be room for student support. So just feel free to reach out, and generally would be nice to keep in touch and also hear some of your feedback and questions and thoughts on this kind of, on the content that I just shared with you. So here's my contact information. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.